She asked me, Di, are you being the type of man that you would want to marry your daughters?
Welcome to V is for Victory, a podcast about how small businesses overcome big battles. I'm your host, Jill Miller of Vera Creative, a boutique marketing firm in the Chicagoland area where I'm also a part-time professor of an advertising course. Join me as I talk with entrepreneurs about the challenges they faced as well as their strategies for success. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of V is for Victory. Before we get started with my special guest today, I just want to ask you that if you are getting anything of value from this podcast, to please download, like, share, write a review. My small business and my podcasting efforts truly appreciate it. So today, I brought a super dad onto my show. His name is Manuel, and he's straight out of Vancouver, Canada. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Professor. And I've wanted to say that for so long. So this is so good.
Yes. And that's in my intro. So people know that about me. That's in my intro on the show
so
that I teach.
I love it. I love it. It's an honor to be here. Thank you for this, just this great opportunity to connect with you, your audience, but more importantly, hopefully make impact in one person's life, right? Like that's always my goal when I have these conversations. There's no hidden agenda. It's just simply, if I can inspire, motivate, or educate one person in a fun way to do something great, I've done a good job, and you've created a platform that does that every day. Yes. So it's just great to be here. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. So full disclosure, the way that I get guests a lot of times is, I get a ton of emails, people ask me, but I'm on a platform called Podmatch. So we'll do a little shout out for Podmatch. Nice. And usually you get this email and it's it's like a bot. I don't know what you guys do on your end, but it's a big long thing that talks about why the guest would be great for your show. And it goes on and on about how they're distinguished in their field or what books they've written and da, 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 da. And your bio intro email is totally different. And I was like, okay, this is really interesting. I don't know anything about you, and I'm going to keep it that way. And we're going to go and launch into the most organic conversation ever. And so that's why I picked up the piece of the super dad. I loved that, and I loved the dating your wife. I love those two things. I'm like, this is really like totally different than anything I've ever talked about on my show before. So talk to me about how do you get that title, super dad?
Wow. So there's this thing called the birds and the bees. No, I'm just joking.
It's third child over here. I know it well.
I know. You're already a pro of this. So, but no, you see, a man meets a woman. No, my wife and I, we met. Gosh, this is going back a long time. I'm 45 right now, and okay. I'll be 46 in about a month's time. And we met when we were both in our early 20s, and here in Vancouver. And we just, it was like an instant connection, but she wasn't looking for anything serious. I had just come out of a relationship. Actually, I was engaged of all things, and
scandalous,
young and silly, and just, I have no idea what I was doing, but it seemed like something that was right to do. And anyways, long and short of it, ended up meeting her. My brother introduced us, and we just hit it off, and she was saving money to go traveling, to leave indefinitely. And I was like, oh my gosh, don't want to get too close to this woman because she's gonna leave, gonna break my heart. And anyways, to get right to the point, I was able to convince her to come back after being away for 6 months in Australia. So I got her back, and we've been together ever since. But there was always an agreement there to honor her, especially her wishes and vision for a family, because we both wanted to have kids, was to have a really connected family, but also a family that travels full time. And that was something I just didn't understand. I never understood how that could even be possible. And, to sort of jump over about 20 years of our relationship, we had our two kids fairly early. They're now 17 and 19. I have two daughters. My eldest is named Chardonnay. My youngest is named Brie. So for those that are quick, Chardonnay and Brie,
pair well together.
Yes, they do. A couple of socialites in the making, and so it's been just wonderful, just learning from them. And you know this very well. Once you have kids, it's like life for ourselves as individuals, as singles, even when we come into a relation with somebody else, it's still a lot about me, right? Then you get a significant partner in your life, and it's we. Then you have kids, and then it's like them, and almost to a fault though. And I can admit that there's been periods where I've gone in and out of looking after myself or prioritizing also some of my own self-care, become more of a, parentdom and martyrdom are very closely related. We have a lot of parents that overextend themselves and will put themselves last for everything else. And now this is common with business owners too, because our business is really just our next child, right?
Yep.
So
Yep, our babies.
It's our babies, and we tend to prioritize that over ourselves. So skip over all that stuff. We're 20 years later, and through that life we've experienced a lot of cool things. A number of years ago, I exited out of a business that I was involved with for 17 years. Fitness equipment industry. We had a chain of retail stores, also an e-com business that spanned the country. And on top of that, we had some B2B enterprises, manufacturing overseas. I mean, it was quite the operation.
Wow,
At the peak when I exited, we were doing 8 figures a year, and it was fun. I mean, I really did enjoy it. And this is just a little side note for anybody that's listening and watching this. When you're into a career and you're knee deep in it, and it's something that you love, and when you get into it and you really start to feel that you've got that groove, like where you just feel like things are clicking, because it's really hard, right? Running a business is hard. Okay.
Yeah.
There's nothing, otherwise everybody would be an entrepreneur, right? Everyone would have businesses. Yeah. But it's not easy, but it is worth it. And I always envisioned that was my life's path, was to be in this business that we started. And things change. I changed. My life changed, the world changed.
Yeah.
But more importantly, my relationship with the world changed. And at one point, and this gets back to this long-winded answer to your question, where did the title come from?
I like it.
Because I didn't forget that. I was very much in my 20s and my 30s driven by my ego. I was chasing that idea of success, and I still couldn't tell you what that meant. But
okay, that was going to be my next question. What did that mean at that time?
Please, I thought it was
more money, more problems,
an amassment of stuff, right? Like the car, the houses, I just thought that's what it was. I mean, that's what I believe. That's what. And now, more importantly, a lot of my spheres of influence, my immediate connections, the people I spent the most amount of time with, those were the common things that we often talked about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I believed everybody else was chasing. So if you could get that, it meant you made it, Right. And as much as we started to achieve certain successes in that area, I never really felt fulfilled or satisfied or even, it didn't motivate me. Money's not been a motivator for me. Impact has. And a little side note, the more I chase impact, it's funny how the income goes up. I don't know. There must be a connection to that, But after 17 years, it was, I don't mean to skip over something, but there was rather something traumatic that happened 13 years ago. So this is, my wife and I, we were about halfway into our 22, 23 years together. We already had 2 kids. Our daughters were under the age of 6 at the time. I was really struggling with a very poor relationship with alcohol. And sometimes that would lead to narcotic use, as well as other things I'm not proud of. And I would justify a lot of those actions as me releasing stress, managing my anxiety, because from an early age, around 9, 10 years old, I really started to experience anxiety regularly and social anxiety. And I also started to put weight on to the point, by the time I was 15, I was morbidly obese. And this created a lot of mental health challenges for myself. And I didn't know how to manage them. So, eventually I rediscovered and got to a place where I was ready to make some changes. And it took 2 years to get to a place where I felt healthy. And in that process, I learned a few things about myself. And I also learned that I like to help others with change. Because all of a sudden people started asking me, friends of my parents would come over to us. Now imagine this, I'm a 17-year-old boy, right? I've just had this significant lifestyle change over a 2-year period. Friends of my parents that were more than twice my senior, right, were coming to the house, not to see my parents, but actually to sit me down and ask me questions about how they could get healthier. And this is the first time in my life, 17 years on the planet at that point, that anyone had come to me because they saw me as someone that had value to help them. Mm-hmm. I never thought of myself that way, as someone that had value to offer.
I don't think
So
most 15 to 17-year-olds do.
true enough,
Regardless of what they've gone through.
true
I
enough.
feel like for an adult to invest in you like that is got to be really something special to have been on the receiving end of.
It was pretty awesome. And I knew it. Like I was like, I never had felt fulfilled or joy in that sort of way before, like really proud of myself, like from the inside out, like I could help someone and it made me feel so good. And that's when I got bit by the coaching bug, and so in many different ways, I've been coaching ever since then, getting on almost 30 years now later. And anyways, in this business 13 years ago when I was at my worst, because I went from coping with my emotions with food to wow, this thing called alcohol. When I drink a few drinks and I'm in a social environment, my social anxiety doesn't feel like it's here anymore. Like
Right.
I can talk to anybody, I can be the life of the party. Like I was somebody completely different.
And there was
you
a
know
lot of social opportunities, right? Or
yes,
expectations when you're in like
both.
a corporate world. Yeah.
Yes, both. And as I was rising in the ranks, and what I mean by that was when I started out, I was working with a company, excelled very quickly in the first couple of years to the point where the joint venture partners had a falling out, but one of the partners who had been my business mentor, like really within that business, he saw what I was capable of and made me an offer I could not say no to.
Oh.
Literally, I was able to come in as a junior partner in the new venture that we started together. And that's what we did for 17 years was this. We built a new company, a new business, and learned a ton in that process. And it was a lot of fun. It gave my family and I a wonderful life, great experiences.
Mm.
But again, I hadn't ever really done any inner work. I'd always been so focused on the exterior, and that's also the
Hmm.
problem with the fitness industry. Let's
Yeah.
be honest here. It's especially in the digital media age that we're in. I mean, it is a lot of filtering, literally and metaphorically, but also it's very surface. It
Yeah.
really is, and
Anything can
struggle with
be
that.
used as a distraction, even if it's a
Mm-hmm.
healthy habit.
Mm-hmm.
So like,
Well said.
I as a yoga teacher, a lot of people are just like, oh, I can shut my brain off. And it's like, well, that's all good and well, but sometimes you have to go through it and deal with it
So
to
true.
overcome it, right?
Oh
You
my
can't just
gosh.
block it out or do the things that don't let it be something that numbs you out, just like Netflix or your phone, social media, those things. So
You're
yeah, I
right.
hear you on that.
Because I imagine I forgot. Yeah, I forgot that you mentioned your yoga teacher. Because as a yoga teacher, you would see a lot of that. But especially people that are attracted to yoga, they're looking for calmness, stillness, presence. And
Hmm.
and that's a nice thing about that practice. And
Yes.
but that was not a practice that I had ever done. I was always into weight training and
Yeah.
more of that rough, gruff kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
and because I didn't have that connection, I would say I was very dominant to one side, and if we're,
Hmm.
we're talking about masculinity and we want to get into that whole conversation, I was definitely in a place where I was just making decisions based on ego and how I believe people perceive me. I had no very close male friends. They were very business relationships, but beyond the business connection in that respect, there was nothing.
Like
Like
deep
the level of
conversation, like
no,
right. Yeah,
no,
it's all
no.
surface level, like you said. Yeah.
It is. It's all surface level, right? Like now, that was just me because I didn't know how else to deal with that. And you can imagine that compounds. And for 15 years, so I learned how to manage my anxiety with alcohol. On top of that, it was just my stress release, and I would justify my actions because I earned this.
Yeah.
I work hard, so
Hmm.
this is okay. I deserve this. This is my release, and it became just a regular thing, and it started to really erode at my relationship with my wife,
Hmm.
my kids, but then it also started to affect my professional relationships, and things were they were not going well. And to the point that one day my wife sat me down and she was really upset because she was at her breaking point, and to be
Hmm.
fair, she had tolerated me for a long time. And if we're both, my wife and I, we've admitted this. Now, please recognize we've also had some counseling. Like we said, we're going to work at this. We want to be together, but to do that it was going to take work.
Hmm.
More importantly, I needed to do a lot of work, and it, we got to a place where she was entertaining, and not even entertaining. She had basically. I don't want to use the term ultimatum, because
Yeah.
I think some people take that and I know for some people I mean, it's triggering, right? To
Hmm.
say, oh yeah, it was like, you do this or we're done. And
Yeah.
she was never like that, but she was at a place where she's like, I can't do this anymore. This is not an environment for us to raise our kids in.
Hmm.
And here's the hardest part was I was in this moment very present. I was also really hungover because I had spent the night out. And that's also what brought us to this moment. And she looked at me and I realized I had nothing to defend because there was nothing to defend. Like I could no longer justify it.
Hmm.
And she asked me one question. Now, this is the question. So anybody that's listening or watching, like, this is the question of questions. She asked me, Di, are you being the type of man that you would want to marry your daughters? And when you think about that, because when you think about kids, like once you have kids, you become very aware that everything you do and say, it's being documented in their minds.
Oh, yeah.
They absorb everything, everything. They don't miss a beat. When you think they're not listening, trust me, they're listening.
Oh, I
They're
know.
aware. And like when they're these little kids and their brains are still forming, like they just absorb everything. It's incredible how the mind works with the youth. Uh,
It's almost one of the most scary parts of being a parent.
no
Because if you're
doubt,
going to
right?
mess up your kids, that's how it's going to get done.
It's true, but it is true. And I realized in that moment, I had this vision where I was just like, if a guy like me that was acting that way, 13 years ago, if a guy like
Right.
I was at that time, modeling the habits that I was modeling, came to my home saying, listen, I like, can I see your daughters, get closer to your daughters? Like, like it just, I wouldn't even let them in the house.
Right.
Like, but yet this is what I was saying to my kids as a man, as a father, as a brother, as a son, as a business owner, as a community leader. Like, this is what I was mentoring to my kids who were both, 4 and 6 at the time. This is what I was saying. Cause our kids, they look at their parents. They are the first representation
Of the
of
world. Yeah.
whatever it is, like we're not only the mold, but we also set the bar.
Yeah.
I wasn't setting the bar very high. And it was in that moment I made a commitment to my wife and my kids, but more importantly, for once, I made a commitment to myself. I was going to go 1 year without drinking. Now, from 18 years old, the most I'd ever done is like a sober September. Like I'd never done more than a month without drinking. And so I thought I could do it. A few months in, I realized how hard it was. And that's when I needed help. But here's the thing, and the long and short of it all, I realized as much as I was chasing success, I didn't really feel successful in my personal life. Because once you start to qualify and quantify what success means to you, you start to realize that most of the time our success or idea of that's very biased to the business side.
Yeah.
How we
Oh, for
produce,
sure.
how we show up, how we impact the world in certain instances, but usually based on how we're remunerated. At least that's what it was for me. And as such, I didn't have a different way of doing it. So it was just tough. Like it was just really confusing time. And so that's when I needed help. And at this point, I didn't know how to ask for help. I as a male who identifies as a male, I look at who was role modeling, who was dripping into my life, who I was spending the most time with. Like as men, we never asked for help. We wouldn't cry. We would not show the emotions. You're either very stoic, no emotions, or you show anger. Like,
Yeah.
that was it, and this is what was modeled to me. And so I was just really confused and lost. And all of a sudden I took the crutch away, my coping mechanism. And now I'm like,
Yeah.
oh man, I'm like, what am I going to do? And that's when I realized this was the right thing to be doing because of that feeling of how confused and lost and unsure I was. I
Yeah.
knew it was the right direction to keep going.
Yeah. Like, yeah, you're like, this is uncomfortable. And
Yes,
that's
thank you.
how I know that I need to, break through this. Yeah.
Exactly.
Cool.
And so I got to work. And this is the first time in my life I did inner work.
Yeah.
And I know you know this very well, being the yoga practitioner and teacher. Like I didn't know about any of that stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
I was aware of it. I'd read some books, seen the occasional TED talk, but really, like I remember I saw the movie Eat, Pray, Love. I saw that too.
Okay.
And,
A couple memes inspired me.
It, yes. But that was it. That was the extent of it. So emotionally, my emotional intelligence, let's say, was very low. And I needed to work on that, but for myself. so I could rediscover myself and do I truly want? What makes me happy? What is, truthfully to myself, what is success? And how do I measure success when it comes to family, comes to friends, comes to community? So it wasn't just now a financial idea of success. It was more holistic. And even then, it's still very subjective, right? And it's not like we can objectify and say, this is, you hit this and do this, you will be successful. I mean, it's not that easy.
Like the levels of enlightenment. When you can meditate for 20 minutes. Yeah.
Well, funny enough, you should say that because, okay, so I cleaned myself up after a year. I did a lot of work. There's all this inner work. I'm still working at my business with my partner, and our company's growing still.
Are you going to social events and not drinking? And then are people asking you like, why? Because I have
for the first
people.
6 months.
Okay.
I tried, and it was really hard. One, because I didn't know how to relate to people. I did not know, because as myself, being someone that was already dealing with a lot of anxiety and has this like I don't want to say social awkwardness, but at times it could be, especially if I don't know anybody.
Yeah.
I will be the guy that sits in the corner. Now, not so much anymore. I'm good at putting myself out and dealing with those emotions now, especially my anxiety. And if you want to talk about that, I can talk about how I did that and how I've gotten to a better place. But it was just a lot of work, in that year. And after about 6 months, I started doing more social things, but I had to reevaluate who all my connections were.
So for 6 months, you cut out the social. And that allowed you to not. Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's good though. That's
I had to take all the distractions away, right? So I could focus and prioritize me.
That's like a 12-step thing though. I mean, that's like part of the whole, right? You have to totally change who you're hanging around. And like you keep saying, like you become the people that you spend the most time with. Correct. So yeah. So to kind of just say like, no, you had to learn to say no to those social events because otherwise it was too tempting. And then you wouldn't be able to do your inner work because you were numb.
And if I'm honest, I did get invited by a few people to some social things that I normally would do, like watching USC with the guys, at the pub. And I'm not drinking. And I'll tell you, by the second, third match, like there was no connection happening.
Right.
Like, and also I was able to observe, and I was like,
yes,
holy smokes, this is how I normally. Well, and I don't want to say that because, like, listen, they're good people.
Right.
But their priorities and their way of dealing with things and what they wanted out of life was a certain way, and we weren't on the same path.
Yeah.
And deep down, I kind of wanted to try to help them. Like, and that maybe
naturally.
This is it.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, because as I'm rediscovering,
I feel so good. I'm seeing light. Like,
yes,
come experience what I'm experiencing.
Thank you. That's the best way to describe it. Yeah. So I was like that, and then I realized, people change when they want to change, because that's how I changed too. But I sort of thought that if I kept rubbing off on them, maybe they too would change. And it made me realize, if you can't change the people around you, you just got to change the people that you're around. Right. Yes. And so I had to find new association. And thankfully I had started in with a community called Toastmasters, which was just very empowering. Helped me with my communication, helped me deal with that anxiety piece and speaking in front of groups, especially people I don't know. Also taught me a lot more valuable leadership skills. And the crazy thing is, a nonprofit. I mean, I was paying, I think, $150 a year to be part of a Toastmasters club, like $150. And I think I've done personal development and professional development seminars and stuff. And, I've spent thousands of dollars for that stuff. And like, none of that other stuff that I've spent a lot of money on equated to the value I got from Toastmasters.
Okay. Yeah.
It is the biggest and most significant piece that's helped me with my change and helped me set off on this trajectory I've been on this last decade, is because of that. And I like to give them credit every time I can.
Yeah.
Because it is just a wonderful program, very empowering, and you can't help but gain personal confidence and clarity about life and your role in your own life when you show up at a Toastmasters meeting. You just got to keep showing up. It will expand your mind. Now, so I got into that, and I all of a sudden started to realize I love speaking in front of people. I love telling a story. I want to share this story, share some of the changes I've been navigating. I want to help people even more. And that allowed me to double down on the efforts. And it got to a point where I just was no longer feeling driven to keep working as I was working. And here's the cool thing. My wife started dripping on me. Remember I told you at the beginning, she was like very much into travel and she always
Yeah.
wanted to be a traveling family. So I think she saw the changes that I was going through. She saw I was less fulfilled with the work I was doing. I had some side hustles that I was getting way more passionate about, just helping people, free communities, like just supporting people in another way that was outside of retail. And I wasn't doing anything for money because I already had a career. I had a
Yeah.
company. I didn't need the money. So I was doing things just because I wanted to do them with no expectation of anything in return other than just to make an impact,
Hmm.
help people with change. And it was so much fun. And I started blogging. I started using social media to communicate this message. Within about a year of doing that consistently, my brand outgrew our corporate brand, which
Mm.
created a little bit of challenges amongst the ranks because one of my posts, my first pieces of content that went super viral was a post that talked about 99 workouts you can do without equipment.
Oh,
And you can do
right.
it anytime, anywhere, any place. Now you can
Oops.
imagine, yeah, we're a business that's doing about 8 figures in fitness equipment sales a year.
Yeah.
And most of the people that work for us were on commission. So, all of a sudden they get one of the partners saying, hey, you never need a piece of equipment ever again because your body's the best. Anyways, it created a little bit. And that's where the crack in the armor, as they say, the kink in the armor, that's like when I really all of a sudden knew 100% this is not the path for me any longer. Because the crazy thing was the amount of referrals I would get from some of the content I was putting out, I was selling more equipment than I had before.
Yeah.
But they just do, and you as a marketing genius and someone that works within this space, the value of that. If you keep helping people give a lot of value,
Yeah.
they trust you. They know you. You become an authority to them. And you know what? They come to you for help. And my equipment sales went up. I was driving more traffic to the stores organically, and yet they were so short-sighted.
Yeah.
They could not just accept what I was doing. They
Hmm.
just felt it
Hmm.
was so different and in conflict. And
Hmm.
so ultimately, the writing was on the wall, and I left.
Yeah.
7 years ago, I quit my career of
Yeah.
17 years. My wife quit hers a month later.
Oh.
2 months after that, we pulled the kids out of school. We
Yes.
gave away all our stuff,
Oh, I love this.
packed up the back of the SUV, and we started going south. Now, as you know, we're in Vancouver, and this was like January at this point.
Okay.
And January in Vancouver is not the most beautiful of places. It's wet and gray. Anyone that knows Seattle climate, Vancouver is about 90 minutes north of Seattle. And, it was just ugly, and we wanted the sun. So we started chasing the sun. We drove south. And at the same time, I had released a book that I'd been working on for a year. So we were able to make it sort of a road trip that we could also promote the book
Book
on.
tour. Yeah.
And we just started traveling. And eventually those travels brought us to Bali, Indonesia, where we lived for 2.5 years. And we came back right before the pandemic. And because my kids wanted to finish high school in Vancouver. So that brings you up to now, like the last couple of years, again, continuing to do what we do. We didn't travel, obviously, like the world didn't travel. So last couple of years, and we're just now getting ready to after my eldest daughter graduates this year, we'll get back to doing some more travel again because we love it. We're slow travelers. We like to live amongst cultures and communities, stay there for a month, 2 months, 3 months, 2.5 years, like Bali.
Yeah.
And it's been fun. It's been a lot of fun. And I just continue to help people with change, but I do it through different online means.
Right. So
Yeah.
that's awesome. What you talked about, the definition of success comes from the business world. Why do you think that that is true for so many people, and how do we change the conversation?
Oh, that's a great question. You know what? I think it's the economic piece, right? Like we look at money and we just automatically presume if you have more, it's successful. Like
Mhm.
I mean, you just look at any media, you look at especially when you look at the movies from the 80s and the 90s, I they glorified greed. you
Mhm.
know, like I think to remember the movie Wall Street,
Mhm.
like the firm. Like, I mean, there's just a lot of these ones that have these pieces and they just talk about the finance and they like the Gordon Geckos, right? Like, now, I mean, that's an exaggeration, of course, but it was something that was very common. I was growing up, I'm an 80s kid. And I grew up around that, especially in the 90s. I mean, everyone was talking about how much money you make, what kind of car do you drive? Like, it was everywhere. And even though we had some financial, like I remember my dad in the late 80s, they're like, man, his stock portfolio, I think, dropped by like 80% overnight one night during that crash. And I remember seeing the anxiety and stress on his face and how he was acting and his friends were acting. I was like, oh man, how's money a good thing? You know, like
Right.
this is, they're just going nuts over this. And, you know, obviously, hindsight, 10 years later, I was experiencing similar things, you know, in the sort of late 90s .com boom, right? Like, it's great. We saw it, but then it was also sort of crashed, right? And, we've had a few of these now in the, you know, 2008, 2009, right? And even the pandemic. So I mean, we see these cycles, but yet the financial piece is always the one that people talk about the most.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I had to figure out a new way to look at success. And I think it was because I had to ask a different question. And what I mean by that is I had to qualify what is success, but more importantly, does it have to have a financial component to it? Like, what if success didn't have a financial component to it? What would it look like then? Like, so if you just take that piece away, it involves now thinking about it and having to describe success very differently. And so for me, that was it. Like, if I take the money component out, if I take any that financial piece, and if I say success isn't tied to financial gain, what would success look like now? And that's where being a dad, having a great relationship with my spouse, you know, being a good community leader, making a difference in people's lives, you know, like that is where I measure success now. And especially, how do I feel? You know, because there's been times where I've made great money, I've done very well, but it never made me feel really happy.
Yeah.
But what you do with the money can, you know, you can definitely contribute in a big way financially. If you have extra finances, that's wonderful. But I always felt that I wanted to give time. I wanted to give presence.
Mm.
One, it made me feel more fulfilled, but it also was able to help people better rather than just writing a check, you know,
Mm-hmm.
like, and that's, you know, maybe a little bit different on my side, but that's just what I feel success is for me. You know, it's sort of that ability to do what I want, when I want, with who I want, and not have to worry about any expectations for doing that thing. You know what I mean? Like with that, if that makes sense. Anyways, I'm curious, what is your definition? I'd
Yeah.
love to hear that.
Yeah. So, gosh, I've never been asked this. I would say something like similar. You know, I think you have to be a giver in life. And
I
I
like that.
think, yeah, I think like for me, I feel successful because I have had a business for 12 years and I've never not made money, you
That's
know? So
amazing.
so even if we
Congratulations.
kept the money piece in there, like that to me, I'm not showing up at work and relying on somebody else to pay
Yeah.
me for the job done, right? I have been able to successfully motivate myself intrinsically
Yes.
without those need of the pat on the back from a boss all the time or a promotion or a this or a that. So in the workplace, that's kind of how I've defined success. A parent, I'm still figuring that out because my kids are so young and you know, I'm really hard on myself. And so for that piece, I think, you know, just being able to put the phone down some days and pour into your kid, that's successful,
It is.
especially as a business owner, because you feel so tied to your clients. And like you said, that's, you know, your baby. So just recognizing those little precious moments with your children and being able to
Yes.
be like, oh, I got a timeout on the work stuff and focus on my kid right now. Like that's a success. So I don't know. I feel like in every situation you can kind of define success differently and it looks a little differently.
And I think that's the best answer you can give, because I honestly feel that also the it's a moving target, you
Yeah.
know, like it changes as we change. At least that's what I've noticed. And please, I just realized, you know, as we've been talking, I'm not here to vilify economic gain. Okay, like
Mm,
we live in a global economy, and it's one of my pillars is actually. So I use this
yeah. The 5 F's.
alliteration, 5Fs. Yeah. So family, fitness, faith, finances, overarching roof of fun. So those are the
Mm,
5Fs, and it's always on a foundation of health first. And I always like to use more of a metaphor or an analogy of, if you think about your life as a house and you are the architect, you know, the general contractor developing and maintaining that house, that life, if you will. We always have to look at what's it built on. What
yeah.
is your
What's
foundation
your
first? And
foundation? Yep.
foundation
Build
for me
your
is
house on
health.
a rock. Hmm.
Yeah.
Building on a rock,
and
not sand.
and that's important, right? Like we know this, like it's sort of that forced logic. We're all like, okay, I remember the three little pigs, I know what happens here, you know,
Yeah.
like it's like because that's true though. Like if you play with this analogy a little bit, and you think about a house, and I'm talking about the way I draw, I'm not an artist, but the you know, draw a square with a triangle on it, there's my house. There's four walls. I use an F to represent each wall, and then the roof as well, which is fun. Fitness, faith, finances, family are the four walls on a foundation of health. And you know, you could have some termites in one of those walls. That means you're gonna have to do some extra work to reinforce that, because all of a sudden you get a hurricane or a tornado coming through. If your house isn't solid, or there's issues or imbalances, it's going to take a beating. You know,
Yeah.
you might still have the foundation there, but you got walls falling down. You might have to renovate or put on another coat of paint. I mean, we know life is dynamic.
Yeah.
And just because I'm using those F's and I'm using those values as guiding lights for me, I'm not saying everyone else has to use the same ones, but I invite people, think about if your life was like that. What would the four walls be? What would your foundation be? And what would the roof, overarching everything, be? And that's why I like fun, because if I'm not smiling at least once every day, there's room for improvement. You know, like
for sure.
that's
For
it.
sure.
And but the finance piece, why I have that there is there's been periods in my life where the financial aspect has created the most amount of anxiety and stress for me. And it's usually whenever I've overextended myself.
Yeah.
You know, I've spent money I don't have. And in essence, I remember hearing a friend once say, well, we leverage our future to pay for right now. And I always resonated with me, because I was like, oh man, is that so true? That is the business of credit cards, you know? And so I invite people to be financially responsible and think about how do they create or create economic gain for themselves? What's the means of doing that? I love the Japanese philosophy, ikigai, for that example. And ikigai sort of talks about how you show up in the world, something that you're absolutely amazing at, something that contributes. And if you sort of overlap all these circles, right in the middle is your ikigai. That's sort of like where you have the ideal balance of all these different ways. But it's also like they talk about, how do you make money? How do you produce and put out to the world and receive that financial remuneration? And it doesn't always have to, you know, it can be something that brings you great fulfillment as well.
Right. Like you said, impact equals income.
Correct.
Like that's when, and that's the most fulfilling sort of income, and the worry-free and the stress-free. You come from a place of abundance. You come from a plan and a strategy when you're financially sound. And it's like that piece of the puzzle then, okay, one less stressor, right? And one less thing that one more thing taken care of that helps me be successful in all those other areas of life, all those other F's.
Because you notice when you have one imbalance, I know the tendency for most of us, and I see this a lot in the fitness industry, because I remember back in the day when I was working as a trainer, you know, I'd create programs for the clients. They come in, we do the programs, but there was always muscle groups that people are biased to, because there's things that they're good at. People always love doing the stuff they're good at.
Yeah.
But it's the stuff that we're not very good at, or the weak spots, that actually needs more of our attention, you know,
100%,
because it's where things go wrong. And because of that, when we're talking about the F's here, my finance wall was always a little bit shaky. Always. Didn't matter how much I made. It was amazing how shaky it would always be. It was just because the way I was managing that section.
Right. Made more, spend more. Yeah.
Correct. And so we had to revisit that. My wife and I, we got really clear. We're like, we don't want to have debt, you know, unless you have like a home debt. Like that was good debt, you know, at least because we got to pay it, rent or whatever anyways. So we justified, you know, what's good debt, what's not good debt. And the not good debt, let's get rid of that. You know, let's work really hard now, so we don't have to carry that with us as we move forward with our lives. And that helped a lot. It also helped our relationship a lot, but it involved us getting really uncomfortable. We talked to a financial planner, you know, we had to get really honest with our finances. But once we got to there, then you started to realize, you know, the kind of lifestyle that we want isn't dependent on how much money we make. And you know, this is important to take note of, because I think all of us, we get to a place where we do allow ourselves to envision the kind of life that we want to live. And I think if we actually get really honest with ourselves and talk about the things that we want to do every day, and the kind of people we want to connect with, and the kind of ways that we want to contribute to the world, you'll realize that money isn't the most important factor to make that happen.
And we don't need more time to make it happen, right? Like, I think people think like, okay, in order to have the life I want someday, I have to make all this money right now.
Correct.
But you
Yes.
can have that life right now if you
Yes.
shift your priorities away from the, yeah.
Correct. Correct. Yeah. So I know we've gone long, and this is just a big conversation. I love this conversation. I just want to say thank you for this. But I hope
Absolutely.
I've been able to at least let people know that I'm trying to think, like, if there's any value that I've really been able to instill today. And I'm like, hopefully the story at least lets you know that, you know what, there's something you want to do and it involves a lot of change. You're totally capable of doing it. This is not a cliche. It's not meant to be just like a petty little, oh yeah, rah, rah, rah. It's like legit. Okay. Like, I mean, I've gone through so many big changes in my life. Every time I've gone through it, I've thought, my gosh, this is so hard. Why am I doing this? But you persevere,
Yeah.
you sustain, you push through that. And trust me, when you get out on the other side, give yourself some time to turn around and reflect and appreciate how far you've gone. Because we are so darn focused on going to the next thing, going to the next thing. We never take a moment to just say, wow, I did that. Because you'll realize, as hard as it was all worth it. And bottom line, it's because you are worth it. And if you don't feel that way about yourself, find a community to surround yourself with that can drip into you that belief until you believe in yourself. And that was the one thing that really helped me, was the power of community in my life during those most challenging times. And there's lots of great communities out there. So just go find one. If you can't find one, make one.
Yeah.
It's all good. You'll be surprised how many people are out there thinking the same thing and feeling the same way. But we just have to go first and say, hey, this is how I'm feeling. This is what I'm thinking. Anybody else? And you'll be surprised how many people put up their hands, you know?
I love that. I'm going to leave you with this. I'm going to leave you with a book recommendation. I
Yes,
just read it.
please.
Yeah. Do you like reading?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Especially
So,
Audible books. I do like
okay.
audiobooks because I do a lot of cycling. So I love to listen to books when I'm
Oh,
cycling.
very nice. Very nice. Okay. The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer.
Ruthless Elimination. That is a great title. I
Right.
like that.
I know.
Ruthless
Super
Elimination.
powerful right there. Like, that could just be the book, just the title.
Which wasn't even the author?
John Mark Comer. He's a pastor out of Seattle.
Oh, no way. So he's like local.
Yeah.
This is awesome. Well, I mean, just the title alone, I'm like, I want it.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I just
Thank
read it.
you.
It's a great book. I actually led a meditative retreat and I kind of shared part of
What?
the book with it. Yeah. So, and I don't know, something you said was like, oh, he needs to read this book. I don't know what it was. I
I
honestly
do.
don't even know what it was, but yes, I want to thank you because you were
Thank
definitely
you.
impactful. When I record a podcast, I'm always writing things down and time
Mm.
stamping sound bites, and we have a
Oh.
lot of good sound bites. So that's
There's a few.
confirmation that you added value today.
Well, thank you. I felt a little scattered today, just it's sort of like that post-workout brain. It was a really hard one. My coach had me work pretty hard this morning. So I know coming into this, I was already like just trying to stay on one path, you know,
Well,
and that's my
that
own thing. My
and
wife always jokes. She sort of thinks I'm like the dog in Up. Squirrel, you know, like, and to be fair, I am a little bit like that. So anyways, thank you so much for the
Of
opportunity to
course.
connect. This has been absolutely lovely.
Of
Yeah.
course. I mean, I threw you into the fire too. I was like, we aren't scripting a single thing here.
I
We're
love
just
it.
going. Yeah.
Life ain't scripted. It's all good.
And no, heck no. How can people connect with you and find you online?
Oh, thank you. You know, I'm actually really easy to find because of the unique name. I used to think to
Yeah.
my parents, like, what the hell do you call me this for? You know, all obviously because kids and teenagers can be kind of rude
Yeah.
and not the nicest of people. And if they figure out a way to tease you, they will. And
Yeah.
I certainly got my fair share with my name, especially a first name like Di. It's like,
What does it mean?
it's
What's
Welsh for David.
David? Oh,
So
okay.
it's a Welsh name. So if you actually are in Wales or you see how they it's sort of like, you know, you might know someone named Richard, you might shorten it to Dick, you know,
Yeah.
or Ben and Benjamin. And David, the way they say David,
Oh,
we
right.
also
David. Yeah.
David, right? So
Yeah.
Di's that pet form. And my father was a David, so it kept the confusion down. And we have Welsh in our lineage. And my last name's Portuguese, though. So yeah,
Okay.
as I tell everybody, don't worry about it. I'm just Canadian. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's like so Di Manuel. If you can type that in on any social platform, you'll find me. Just send me a little note. Say, hey, this is what's got me really excited right now. You know, like I love to hear what people are excited about because that passion, especially when it's unbridled, man, that changes the world.
Yeah,
Like it's just,
yeah.
it's everything. And so I just love hearing people's stories. I mean, look at you. You get to do these conversations every day. I mean, you totally do this. You're nailing this. And I just want to say thank you, because we need more spaces like this to share these types of conversations, and to educate and inform, but also motivate a lot of us and inspire us in other ways that we never thought possible. So thank you for putting this out. I know it takes
Yes.
a lot of energy, and often there may not always be a lot of thanks, but I just want to say thank you.
Well,
And
thank you
it's been
for,
great.
yeah, thank you for recognizing that. And I definitely agree. The more we talk about what we're passionate about, the more it fuels that passion.
That's right.
So awesome. Di, thank you so much for your time today. I wish you nothing but
Thank
the
you.
best, but let's keep in touch. Read that book,
Yes,
and
I
then
will.
you'll come back and you'll be like, "Poof," your head will be exploding with ideas.
And I'm doing a podcast in about a month and a half. I'll be launching one, and I'm circling back because I want to come and grill you. So
Yay! Yes, have me as a guest. I love being a guest. Thank you so
I
much.
can't wait.
Oh, you're an awesome
Oh,
guest. Okay.
it'll happen. That's going to happen. So I can't wait. So we will have a follow up. It's not goodbye, but it's simply, as Tigger says, ta-ta for now.
Ta-ta.
As you can
Thank you.
tell, again, parent talk, right? I mean, it's just like endless. I often joke, I only got my wife pregnant so I could tell dad jokes. Like it's
I only
I swear.
podcast so I can talk to adults.
Yes. But thank you again. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, likewise. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for listening to my mom's podcast.